Welcome into another edition of the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast, episode 139. Thank you for making us a part of your day, your night, your morning. Apple, Google, Spotify, listening on the audio side, or on YouTube, watching the show on the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast YouTube page. By the way, we're on Amazon Music and Pandora, so if you prefer to listen there, that's great too. Episode 139 today, requirements of a successful hitting coach, part one. We're going to do part two in a couple of weeks. We're doing part one this week. So let me bring in my friend, co-host, professional evaluator, successful business owner, my former coach, current day renowned coach, Jake Epstein. I did like a little mashup between Cassie's intro and your intro today. So Bacon, what's shaking?
I just feel so good whenever you introduce me. It just makes my entire week listening to that.
I got to tell you, we're recording this at night. I'm coming off a workout after work, and Jake is coming off giving lessons. I like doing this. I was telling you off air when you're coming off lessons, because I always feel like, not that you're not on fire every week, because you are, but I always feel like you're just revved up, ready to go when you're coming off lessons. So this should be a good episode and a good topic for that today too. Requirements of a successful hitting coach, part one. You touched on something last week though that I really liked, and you didn't really expand on. I do want to expand on it this week. And we're going to talk in this episode about a couple of things. One of them being the puck bat handle. Do you know what I'm talking about? We'll talk about that later in the episode. You do? Okay. I'm sure you do. Yep. Of course you do. Do this for a living, for God's sakes. I'm asking. It's like
I should know. I mean, part of
asking
being
Elon
a good
Musk,
hitting
you know
coach
about Tesla?
Yeah, knowing what's going on in the world.
Right. Yeah. Last week, though, you talked about Bruce Bochy, or maybe it was the week before. I don't remember, but you talked about Bruce Bochy coming into your house. And by the way, for those who don't know, start at the beginning. Jake's father, Mike, has a hitting certificate from Ted Williams and knows Ted Williams or knew Ted Williams personally. Jake does as well. For those who don't know, Ted Williams was the last guy to hit 400 at the major league level. Jake also has a whole, we'll call it phone contact book of old friends from the time he was a kid wandering around major league clubhouses of players that his father played with and players that he played with growing up in college, in the pros, in the professional ranks, who are now, by the way, on major league coaching staff. So my point is later on, no. Well, no, my point though,
they used to be
okay,
players,
you said it, not me. I didn't listen. You said you're old. For the record, I didn't say you're old. We're going to do like a topic where, not really a topic, but we're going to do an episode later on in the year or whatever that's centered around just stories that you have of these players. Because I think there's some really good stuff in there. One of those people, though, being Bruce Bochy, who was a personal kind of a coach to you. And by the way, for those who don't know, I love listening off all these people that you know, by the way, and that you have relationships with. So take that, hitting Twitter, internet hitting coaches. Take that, fucking surfboard, fucking 102 or whatever your brand is out there. You don't know Ted Williams, nor do you know Bruce Bochy. None of you know Bruce Bochy. I don't know him either personally, but Jake does. You know that Bruce Bochy, the manager of the Texas Rangers, World Series winning manager of the San Francisco Giants. You mentioned last week, though, he used to come to your house and you guys used to discuss baseball. You guys used to discuss and talk about the mental side of things. Let's expand on that a little bit. Do you have any other stories just related to Bruce Bochy, how he helped your career and what you used to talk about in trying to get you better in the offseason?
Well, he was, it was when I was growing up in San Diego. And so I played, Greg, his oldest son, I think he was a year or two behind me in high school. But we would go, my dad was doing work with the Padres at the time. So essentially we would go hit in the winter, and my dad would go down to the Jack Murphy Stadium and to the indoor, tunnel that they had there. And so my dad would kind of work with me and Greg, and then Bruce would take me aside and just, kind of, he would do catching drills with me because I was really tall. I was a good catcher in high school, and he was a big catcher, obviously major league catcher. And so, we would work through all different situations. So it was pretty cool to have that kind of hands-on stuff, and just people my dad came, old friends of his that would come into town and we'd have dinner. I think that's what we were talking about. Jeff Torborg was the other one. Right. He was a big league manager. And I remember exactly the drills he was having me do with my hands, so that there was no tension in my hands when I was catching. And I still teach the stuff that Bochy, when I have players that I coach and that I'm trying to help as catchers, the stuff that he taught me safety stuff is, plays at the plate kind of stuff, when where to stand, how to take it away, how not to, make sure your knee's in the wrong angled position when somebody's sliding in. So things like that you take for granted. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. I was very fortunate as a kid because, my dad he played in the big leagues for 9 years. And so there were always people coming into town. And, I have a picture in my office, of me and Ted Williams. I have a picture of myself and Joe DiMaggio. I have a picture of, behind me that's Pete Rose that you see behind me. So
over your shoulder to your right.
Yeah. So it was really, I'd go to spring training and I get to meet all these people, and I was young and I didn't know a whole lot about it. But later in life, they actually renamed the road near my high school Ted Williams Parkway in San Diego. Cool. And so Ted, I was older at this point when he came out, and they dedicated it to him. And so he came and he talked to, all my teammates and all my buddies, and he stayed at our house. And, that kind of stuff is really, really cool. And I was pretty, I was still young. I was a teenager, but, my dad was able to absorb that information. Probably the best, I guess, story. I don't know if it's a story, but, just my dad would go, he wasn't in baseball at this time. This was in probably the late 80s, mid 80s. He would go to Florida every year because one of his clients was there in Melbourne, and he would go stay with Ted, at his house, and they would just talk hitting. But not only would they talk hitting, they would watch games together. And my dad said he learned more, and this was 10 years after my dad retired, 15 years after he retired. He said he learned more watching a 9-inning game next to Ted Williams than he really learned playing the game the entire time, because Williams talked through every scenario, every situation, what the pitcher was trying to do, what the hitter needed to do to counteract that. Where was the defense playing? Okay, well, that's tipping you as a hitter. They're trying to throw you away, or they're trying to throw you in, so you hit it into the shift. And all these things. And my dad said 1 9-inning game, he learned an encyclopedia's worth of information. And when you have good coaches, and I know that's our topic today, it's more about hitting coaches, but when you have good managers, that's why Bochy is so great. There's so many steps ahead in the game. They're 4 or 5 hitters ahead in the game. They're figuring out matchups. If we're down a run, if we're up a run, if we're down 3 runs, if we're up 2 runs, they're constantly trying to run these scenarios to their head. And that's what it's hard for me. I was, before we came on the air, I was watching the Texas A&M Arkansas game, and they're interviewing, Schloss, not between innings, but like
Schloss, he is their head coach.
He is the A&M head coach.
Right.
So they're interviewing him in a very hostile environment. Arkansas is about as hostile as you're going to get.
Really? I wouldn't expect that. I don't know, for whatever
reason.
It is
just, it brings out the worst in any team that's playing there. It's just it's not like the fans are, mean. I mean, there's some loud ones, but they're into it. They're loud. There's 12,000 people there every single game. And there's so much tension for you to perform there. And anyway, it's a very hard place to play. So A&M's having a rough time, and the umpires kind of aren't going the way that A&M needs them to go. They miss a call. And anyway, so old Schloss gets on, and they're talking, the first ball is a chopper to the first baseman, and he boots it. And the Schloss is like, he said a bad word. And then he talked about having to go to CVS to get himself some medication to make it through the rest of the game because he was all stressed out. And it just tells you like the enormity of the situation. And they're trying to do interviews with these head coaches or managers, whatever you want to call them, when that guy's got to be setting his defense and figuring out who's in the bullpen and who's he going to pinch hit for if he has to do that. And there's just so much that goes into being a good coach. The preparation, the practice time, that's paramount, right? You have to prepare your team the right way. And when you get into games, you have to let your players play. We've talked about that a lot. That's the John Wooden, kind of part of me as a coach. But you have to still put the right pieces together. You're not going to sit there and tell the kid he needs to change his stance or his elbows or his hands or anything like that. But you have to make sure he's matched up against, the right pitcher. So anyway, that's just, there's so much knowledge. There's so much, and just listening to games. Chris Burke. Why do I feel like that's his name? Yeah,
that's his name.
Astor. He's so good, right? Ex-Tennessee All-American.
Kyle Peterson's good too.
He's good too. Just the knowledge that they spit out watching games, when I'm sitting, I learn new information. You said, do you know what the puck is on a bat? Yeah. But you know how many coaches out there don't
Right.
update their information?
Yeah.
Do you have any coaches out there just teaching the same thing they taught 5 years ago? Doesn't mean you got to change your whole philosophy, but there's so much information. If you're not continuing to learn, I don't care what you do, but especially as a coach in a skill sport, if you're not constantly trying to get better and constantly trying to learn, then you're going to get passed by and your players aren't going to reap the benefits of you as, a coach.
Yeah, I agree. And sorry, I have to, before we get to the puck bat handle, I've seen more and more of that across Major League Baseball with hitters, by the way. But
Yeah.
I do want to ask you, what was the story? Was it Tommy Lasorda? Is it something about with your dad or something? What was that
Yeah.
story? Do you remember? What was that?
So
Do
Tommy
I have the
Lasorda,
right pieces?
he got me my first heart of the hide mitt. I'll never forget that. We
Mhm.
were in Dodger Town, walked into the Rawlings. It was like I don't know, like a trailer, Rawlings trailer. Came back out. He's like, my name, blah, blah, blah. I shook his hand and he looked me in the eye and he said, I didn't shake it very hard, right? I think I was 5. And he said, son, if you're going to shake somebody's hand, shake it. And I'll never forget that. And I tell kids that all the time now. And it came from Tommy Lasorda. But he's like, you got a glove? And I said, no, sir. And he said, okay. So he went in this and he brought me back like a big league glove. Like, here you go. But he would always, so my dad grew up in LA and he played on the Dodger rookies team, which was like essentially your prospect scout team. And Lasorda was the coach. So Lasorda wanted to sign my dad out of college. Because my dad was he was an All-American at Cal, and he was one of the top 2 or 3 guys that were going to sign, out of college that year. And so he would always, kind of schmooze my grandfather. Hey, when are we going to do this? And they'd go to dinner and all that stuff, the courtship. And then my grandfather died like before I was born. And so every time we would see Tommy Lasorda, and I'm talking the first time when I had that mitt, it was probably like 1984, 1983. Hey, Mike, how's your dad doing? Geez, Tommy, my dad died like 10 years ago. Oh, sorry to hear that. And then we see Tommy, he's the whatever, he's the big league manager of the Dodgers. So we saw him, probably 10 times over the next few years as I got older. Every time hey, Mike, how's it going? Hell, doing great, Tommy. How's your dad doing? Tommy, my dad died 40 years ago. So it was
every 10 years he would say, hey, my dad died 10 years ago.
Hey, how's your dad
My dad
doing?
died 20
Because
years ago.
I think he spent more time with my dad or my grandfather than he did with my dad, even though he was trying to sign him back.
Man, I'll tell you, there were you read stories, and I don't know. I think it's somewhat the same nowadays, but it's kind of different because of all the technology and the phones and everything. But the stories from players back in the 80s, from managers in the 80s, the 90s.
Some of the Lasorda sound bites are priceless.
Oh, yeah.
That pop up on the internet.
What was the one? It was Earl Weaver, I think, with the Orioles on their radio pregame. He just won. I don't know if it was fake or not, but he started spewing off all these.
Weaver too. He
played. Oh, he did. I didn't know that.
For Weaver at AAA and then in the big leagues, and he was just he had the short man's disease. My dad said it was impressive the curse words that he would create in a moment's notice. Like that was just the mouth he had when he was yelling at people. He was a great manager.
I mean, I can't wait to do that topic though. Later on when we just hear these are some really good stories.
Yeah, we'll have my dad on. We'll get him to do this. I'll set up the computer. That's his only hiccup.
Right. Gives you like kind of a free weekend off, if you will, right?
No, it'll take me more time.
I see what you're trying to do. So let's talk about this puck bat handle. When I was a kid, you didn't see players do this when I was a kid. The only player I ever remember doing something like this was Gary Sheffield. He used to tape the handle as much as he could, I guess, to balance out the bat. But now bat companies are making bats to where it's a big, huge handle. And we talked about last week with Giancarlo Stanton using the 35-ounce bat.
Yeah.
He gets good whip with that thing. It's science, kids. Go back in last week's archived episode and listen to that. Watch it on the YouTube page. But you probably see it now too with the kids that you're instructing, the pro players that you're scouting and you're doing work for and work with. Why are players now going to that bigger puck handle type bat? I don't have my wood Justin Smoke bat with me right now. I was actually planning on using that as an example. That's a small handle,
Mm-hmm.
but why are players now doing that? Why are they going with that? And what's the benefits to that big handle at the bottom of the bat?
Well, I think what's happened is they're fitting players to bats is what's happening.
Okay.
So they've done it in golf for years, right? You go in, you get fitted, they put you in this shaft, they put you in this size grip, they put you in this weight of the shaft based on how you swing, and you try all these different ones, and okay, these are the best results. Well, baseball's a little bit harder because again, the ball's moving and we're making adjustments. However, they have started to do that. I think it's Marucci that does it. They have a lab down in um, Baton Rouge where they'll have big leaguers come in, and I'm sure it's fairly expensive. They're Marucci guys, so like Rizzo has done. I don't know if the puck is all Marucci or not, though. You'll have to look into that. But I know the lab itself is a Marucci deal, and they give these players different size bats, right? And they have them take X amount of swings off a tee, and they set up a machine. And here's a 35-inch bat. Here's a 34.5-inch bat. Here's one with more weight in the handle. Here's one with a bigger barrel or more end loaded. Here's one that's scalloped out or cupped. And they try all these things, and they say, okay, your bat speed was more with this or less than this, and your exit velocity was faster, even though your bat speed was less because of the density of the bat and the mass of the bat, yada yada yada. There's so many variables. And so what they found is, well, they've added weight to the knob in hopes of counterbalancing it. And with some guys, it works. Some guys like the feel, and then some guys feel like they hit the ball harder, or maybe they do hit the ball harder, or they have more barrel control, or whatever it is. And so then okay, let's put 1 ounce down here. Let's put 1.5 ounces down here. Let's put 2 ounces. And then that's the different size of the puck, essentially, that people are using. So I don't think people are just trying it. I think they're getting tested with it. And then if it passes the test, so to speak, then they're letting it go and running with it.
So this is from Daily Journal Online, and this was a story written by Derek Gould of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch back in March of 2022. If you don't know who that is, he follows the Cardinals. He's, I think, their beat writer for that newspaper. He's been with that newspaper covering the Cardinals for years, and he wrote about Paul Goldschmidt using this type of bat. And you were right. Let me see here. There's a baseball performance lab in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Paul Goldschmidt went there, I guess, in the offseason of 2021, 2022, and left with a custom Marucci bat designed to help increase his bat speed with the oversized knob nicknamed the hockey puck. Now, furthermore, I did Google. I simply said bat companies making puck handle. And it came up with Dovetail bats, Old Hickory bats, which I've heard they have very strong, sturdy, good wood. A lot of hitters like to use Old Hickory. The Trinity Bat Company, don't know much about them. Yeah. So those are and of course, the one I just mentioned, Marucci, about the story. So,
yeah. And I think some of them are what do you call it? Training bats. Some are training bats.
Yeah. Dovetail makes a lot of training bats.
Yeah. So you just have to figure out what works. You're taking a stab in the dark, unless you go to the lab itself and figure out if it works. I always tell them I don't obviously have that kind of technology at my disposal, but what we do have with Blast, and what we do have with K-Vest, and what we do have with the Hit Tracks, I can put together and say, okay, here's X amount of bats. Let's swing your different bats, and we can tell which one a player's swinging most efficiently, right? And which ball is dropping. And sometimes, I think we've talked about this before, that I went with a heavier bat. A kid started to swing a bat that was 1 ounce heavier, 1 inch longer, and wood, and he was hitting the ball harder than his drop 5 aluminum bat, even though he was using a drop 3. It was it was 1 inch longer, so it was probably 3 ounces heavier. And even though it was that much heavier, the momentum and the mass, and he was able to swing it as consistently, he was hitting the ball harder. So you never know until you try. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. If you don't listen, you never know until you try. It's like when my parents used to say, why don't you try some eggplant? Well, I'm not going to like it. Well, you never know until you're going to try. Well, I'm not going to try. It's not visually pleasing. Eggplant is not visually pleasing, by the way. Neither is spinach. I don't understand how people eat that stuff.
I had spinach tonight, Jim.
No, you didn't.
I did.
You're lying.
We had a sauteed vegetables, and we threw it in with some noodles. So
Oh, I don't
spinach,
know how you eat
broccoli,
spinach.
broccoli, mushrooms, beautiful
Broccoli's another
garlic.
one too.
It was very Italian. It was a very Italian feast. A lot of garlic, a lot of onion, some red pepper flakes.
Now, who cooked this meal? Who cooked this meal?
My wife cooked it.
Okay. Broccoli, huh? You're a broccoli guy.
Oh,
What about
we go through a
asparagus?
lot of broccoli in the Epstein household.
What
It's the
about
one vegetable my kids eat, so we
what
eat it like
about
every day.
not even like green beans? Green beans are great. I don't know.
Green beans are yeah, most of them eat green beans. Most of them eat
Carrots,
asparagus, but
cold carrots.
broccoli everybody eats.
Wow. Yeah, I can't do it with the broccoli. Can't
No.
do it. No, it makes me gag. So does
Really?
asparagus. But eggplant makes me gag too.
Asparagus is
You
different.
can watch the show on YouTube as well, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast YouTube page, previous episodes, clips as well. Did you see that new rule, by the way? We can quickly touch on and then move on to our main topic. With the NCAA, their new rules are designed to slow college baseball's recruiting process. Did you see that this week? Being a
Yeah,
former-
junior year, right? They can't.
Right. So Teddy Cahill wrote this this
Mhm.
past week for Baseball America.
He's
And
good.
the
I like him.
story, he is, yeah. Did you ever know he covers college baseball?
Yeah, I met him.
You
I don't
did.
know where I met him, but I met him once on the road.
Yeah. His story, the NCAA Board of Directors is prepared this week to approve a significant transformation of college baseball's recruiting calendar. And the idea behind it is to slow down the recruiting process for high school players. The new rules, which already have passed the Division I Council and just need to clear that final step, whatever that may be, prohibit any communication between coaches and potential recruits until August 1st before the player's junior year of high school. Now, currently, for context purposes, coaches are prohibited from initiating contact with players before September 1st of their junior year, but are allowed to contact coaches. The players are allowed to contact coaches. So within the previous system, to wrap this up, players routinely were offered scholarships and committed to schools as high school underclassmen or even, and here's where you underline it, even middle schoolers. Now, there was a quote from Andrew Checketts, UC Santa Barbara's coach, saying, I think what we're doing at this point is insane, meaning recruiting 14 and 15-year-olds. And I agree because people don't know this, and that's fine, but college baseball does not offer full scholarships. So coaches only have so much money they can dole out. And number two, we talked about with a couple weeks ago on the legendary question that we got via Jimbo Podcast 21 about showcases. You get a certain ceiling at a certain age. You don't want that when you go to a showcase, and you don't really know 14, 15 years old yet what a player's ceiling, unless you're a professional scout, but even then it's very tough. You don't really know what their ceiling might be. And so offering a guy a scholarship at 14, 15 based off strictly potential without even having a clue to what their ceiling is insane to me. But coaches had to do it because they had to keep up. And
They
you
had to
know
do
this
it.
being a former hitting coach at the collegiate level as well.
At Checketts, I actually I go pretty far back with him when he was an assistant at Oregon. How many years is that? 10 years maybe? And I remember talking to him about it then. He's like, I have to recruit. I see these people at showcases. I see their numbers. I see them not square up any balls in the game because they only get 2 at bats. And I got to figure out if I need to offer him or if Cal's going to offer him or Stanford's going to offer him.
Right.
And he's 13 or 14 years old. And it was an arms race. You know, you were trying to beat somebody to the punch, and then some schools overcommit guys. And then they pull scholarships. Some guys don't pan out. Kids don't work as hard because they feel like they're locked up. And that's how it used to be. Now it's back. I don't know where it was with you, but with me, we got letters. I remember my junior. I showed up to high school. This was before travel ball was, really anything. But
this is before, by the way, that coaches could reach out on Instagram. Legally.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But this was like a letter. I remember my first letter. Of course, you remember who I grew up. I played with 2 first rounders in high school, so they probably just threw me a bone when they sent letters. But LSU was the first letter that I ever received. I never talked to anybody from LSU, but they were the letters started showing up your junior year when you got back to school in September. So it's kind of going back to that, and I think that worked because it gives you still have, and then the area code games. After your junior year of high school. That's the big scouting event. And I think it puts a little bit more, right now that if everybody's tied up by then, by the time the area code comes around, everybody's already committed. So it's like, okay, it's just for the major league scouts at that point. Well, now all of a sudden it's going to be more for the colleges because they're going to be able to offer guys now after their junior year just finishes at the area code, and then a month later they'll be able to make them offers. But they're going to see these kids play and get 15, 20 at bats against the best competition in the world. It's fantastic.
Do you want to say who the two first rounders were?
Eric Chavez and Eric Munson. So Chavez first round out of high school, and then Munson, I don't know, he was drafted pretty high, but he went to USC and then ended up being a first rounder.
I think Xavi's a friend of the show.
Yeah, he's well, the Mets are going, but yeah, he'll be a big league manager in, I don't know, maybe a couple years.
Mets hitting coach right now, Eric Chavez, for those who don't know.
Mets
are sputtering a little bit.
Bench coach.
Oh, he's bench coach now.
Yeah, he was hitting coach last year, and then they promoted him.
He did a great job because he got promoted.
Yep, there you go. Got to get promoted.
Buck must love him.
Yeah, he just knows he played the game for a long time. So if you're surrounded by it and you soak up that knowledge and you're passionate, you'll be good.
All right. Email us your questions, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. You ready to get into today's topic? Ready, Freddie?
Yes.
Episode? Yeah.
Yes, Jim,
I am. Let's go. Episode 139, Requirements of a Successful Hitting Coach, Part 1. Again, we'll do Part 2 in a couple of weeks. And for this week's topic, and just this topic in general, I reference a book by a man named Jim Thompson. The book is called Positive Coaching. It's a 182-page, I don't know, call it a guidebook, if you will, for coaches that is designed to help people become better overall coaches in their respective sports. I want to say this. I don't know about you, but and Jake and I have adopted today's topic from that book and the topic in a couple of weeks, and we're applying it to the art of coaching hitters in baseball. In a couple of weeks, we'll be discussing more in depth the applied science of hitting, the terminology, reading data, evolving with technology. But today is more of a broad stroke of the requirements of what it takes to be a successful hitting coach. My personal experience, I've always, when I played, and even now when I look at coaches, I've always wanted someone to have an understanding of what the best hitters in the world are doing on the baseball side and what some of the best college softball hitters in the country are doing at the plate. I never wanted somebody, stop me if you've heard this before, you're all fucked up right now, we got to clean you up. As opposed to, again, this is arbitrary, but I think it's the right way, of a coach saying, this is where we are with you as a hitter right now. This is where we need to get to. I never bought into the cliche-ridden type coach who constantly throws cliches out at you and thinks that they know everything about the game of baseball. Self-explanatory, but it's all over the place, not just online,
right,
but it's in person as well. Nonetheless, there have been hitting coaches that have used social media, we've seen the last few years, Jake, to earn jobs they're not qualified for, or concepts that they marry themselves to. And I really don't see enough, I don't know about you, I don't see enough understanding of what it really takes to be a successful hitting coach with students of all ages, from ages, say, 8 years old to, I'll throw a number out there, make it easy, 25 years old, playing at the professional level.
Well, I think he touched on it with the book. Positive coaching. Positivity is the only way to coach. Otherwise, don't be a coach. Okay. There's times when you can be negative, if you have to motivate, but you have to be positive in your message. Nobody ever gets better by degrading a player. And at the amateur level, that's all I see. It drives me absolutely crazy every single weekend that I go out and help coach softball. I'm helping coach 12-year-olds. And we were in Arizona against really good teams from California and Nevada and Arizona. And I just see so much negativity and berating. And there's just such a time to help. I don't care what part of the game, when a player makes a mistake, hey, guess what? That player knows they made a mistake. The teammates know the player makes a mistake. You don't call out players in the middle of games or in the middle of tournaments, or it's just mind-blowing to me. So positivity, number one. Getting to know your player. Okay, now sometimes this is hard when the kids are 6. Okay, so we're going to skip over the 6-year-olds. But if
T-ball kids,
we're going to go, if I was a college coach, okay, college hitting coach or a professional hitting coach, know the player, create a relationship with the player, get to know the player. What kind of, do they have kids? Do they not have kids? Do they have a girlfriend? Do they have a boyfriend? Do they have a good family life? Did they have a rough childhood growing up? Were they spoiled growing up? What kind of dynamic is it? How can I cater? How can I get my points across to this player? Talk to them about what they know and what they teach. Or I'm sorry, what they're trying to do. What are you trying to do as a hitter? What is your mindset? Mechanically, do you just hit because you've always been a great hitter? Did your dad teach you something? Did you have a hitting coach? Were you working on backspin? Were you working on swinging up more? Were you working on hitting balls on the ground, or figure out what their thing is. Then you create a process of, okay, well, what are your misses? What are we not doing? Well, I seem to chase these pitches. I'm a little bit fast with my rhythm. I'm a little bit jumpy. Okay, let's create a plan. Okay, so here's our 3-step plan. For instance, I had a player come in today, an online academy player, flew into Denver. He had a weekend off, so we're smashing in 5 lessons in 2.5 days. Okay, so we did about 2.5 hours today worth of instruction. I had the plan planned out. He sent me videos. I've had conversations with him of what his games are like. He's a very good high school player. He's a freshman playing varsity. Not very easy. You're 15 years old and you got 18-year-olds on the team and they're throwing you in the middle of the lineup and expecting you to perform. There's a lot of outside pressure, so we've had conversations about, what are you feeling in the box? Are you tense? Are you this and that? What pitches are you getting? So I had a plan based on all of that information. Before we started one drill today, I knew exactly what I was going to do with him. Okay. And then we worked the process. I know that I have 5 to 6 hours of training with this player, and I got the ball rolling today. Exactly. And it worked like a champ. Like, he's on his way, and we're going to keep building different pieces that are going to make him better. Now, if you're a coach of a 10-year-old team, kids will stop playing fun. Okay. So we're hitting the bat. What's not fun? Getting deep in the count. Being 10 years old and telling your players to, hey, make sure you swing at strikes and get deep in the count is bull. The reason it's bull is because the umpire's strike zone's like 24 inches wide and 30 inches high. Like, you got to swing. You got to be ready to swing on every pitch. Doesn't mean you swing at bad pitches, but you have to be ready to hit, ready to be aggressive. As umpires get better and pitchers get better, you can dwindle that down. But kids, if they're not swinging, they're not aggressive, they're not going to play. So it is a big range, between ages. But being a good coach is about understanding the player, understanding the person you're working with. Can I get on? Do I have to motivate this player? Do I have to give him a little? Can I razz them a little, right? Are they sarcastic? Do I need to cut them down a little bit? Having that personality. Are they quiet? Do they just want to listen to music and work on hitting the ball the other way? Can you get technical? Does this person want to look at video, or do they want to feel more? Okay, I want to feel that ball down and in, me getting it in the air. Okay, well, here's, mechanically, I know how you make that happen, but I'm not going to tell a 14-year-old kid how to do that. I'm going to try to get them in that position to make them feel it. Now, if I have a Poindexter that's a boy genius, he's a Harvard player, and he kind of understands angles and things like that, well, then maybe that player learns in a more complex way. But for the most part, you're trying to take very, very complicated information, very high level information, and you're trying to dumb it down so that a 4-year-old can understand it. That's the sign of a good coach. What do you see when you look on the internet? $45 words left and right. Well, you got to decelerate this and accelerate that and resist and blah, blah, blah. How are you going to teach that to a 10-year-old? Right? Don't complicate things. Don't use big words to make yourself appear smarter than you are, right? Good teachers are good teachers because they simplify information. Tom House, maybe one of the first guys I ever heard say that, because that guy's really smart. Like, Tom is a really bright guy, and he would speak like that, and then he'd be like, okay, what makes a good coach? Taking complex information and making a player understand it. And sometimes that's hard to do when you have people that are trying to be complex because they're speaking to an audience of adults. But when I do my certification programs, I'll use some big words, but I don't want my guys to use it. This is what this means when a coach, because I'll get these, oh, what does this and that mean? I'll get these questions and I'll say, well, it means the body's doing this, that, and the other. Okay, so how would you explain it? Well, I would have the player do this. That's it? Yeah. Wow. You sure? Yeah. Put him in this position, make him do this. That's exactly what you're talking about. Okay, I can do that. Yeah, that's the idea of good coaching, is being able to translate information so that everyone can understand it.
I'm not a parent, you are, but I just want parents, for those who are parents in the audience listening, we do have parents in this audience based off the metrics that I see. I'm not a parent again, so you can tell me to,
thank God,
you can tell me to buzz off. Right. There's a great, when you saying that, there's a great lie. I saw a rerun of Everybody Loves Raymond the other night.
It's so great.
And so great. Ray's dad, the late Peter Boyle, great Peter Boyle, said, yeah, microwaves are dangerous. What if I want to have more children? And Ray goes, if God hasn't stopped you, the government will. So that's my excuse. Well, I don't know if it's God or the government, but somebody's stopping me from having children. But parents, I think the biggest, and my father struggled with this too, the biggest disconnect that parents may have with their kids when they're trying to teach their kids, other than that, the kids just don't listen to parents, and parents have to accept that. I'm going to have to accept it one day.
Yep.
I'm sure you have to accept it now as it is. But the biggest disconnect is that parents try to throw so many things out at kids, and they're giving them terminology and ways that they should be hitting both mentally and physically when they're 10 years old, teaching them ways that they should be teaching a 13 or 14-year-old. That's probably, to me, in my opinion, the biggest disconnect between parents trying to coach their kids and even some coaches who aren't successful hitting coaches trying to do that same thing.
It's simplicity at its finest. It really is. It's the only way it works. We had practice last night, and if my neck looks funny because I can't move it, I pitched for probably an hour and a half to the team, and then I learned how to do like a windup in softball so that I could give them a little more game action. Anyway, the body's not built for that. My body's not built for that.
Yeah.
But one of the players, and she's a very advanced hitter. She's probably one of the best hitters, I would say, in the state of Colorado. She's strong. She's quick. She works at it. Well, anyway, she's been struggling a little bit. So I threw her 4 pitches, and she cut under each one of them. Okay, she popped up each one, and so I knew why, right? She was coming forward a little bit, and when you come forward a little bit with your torso, your swing will tend to come down. And when your swing comes down, then you'll end up cutting the bottom half of the ball usually. Okay, so the fix for that is, number one, to sit down on your back knee more. Number two, that helps get your lead arm up a little bit more so you come up through the middle of the ball. So, okay, that would have been like a 5-minute conversation with a 12-year-old who would have been like, just shut up and throw me batting practice, coach. Like, that's your job. That's how 12-year-old, no, they don't think like that. So I said, hey, here's what I want you to do. I want you to keep she's a right-hander. I said, I want you to keep your right ear back, and I want you to take your left arm and finish higher. And I don't tell everyone that. Some players I tell finish lower, right? But for her, finish higher with your left arm, keep your right ear back. On the next 5 pitches, she just hit lasers all over the place. She's 12 years old. She's about 67 miles an hour in softball. So elite softball in college is 80 miles an hour. She's 12, right? Like, somebody's going to get hurt. But that one little move that took me, 8 seconds to tell her made all the difference in the world. And all of a sudden, she's back hitting on track. Okay. Doesn't make sense. I said, keep your right ear back longer. I know what it was going to do. She doesn't need to know what it's going to do. She just needs to do it because she's 12. That's the idea. If I would have made a complicated 3-minute proposition of, hey, this is what you need to do with the bat and the barrel and turn this and turn that and step this way, I would have lost her completely. So as coaches, be positive, have fun, and take your knowledge and put it in a simple form for players to understand.
I think that's a good thing to end on right there.
Thanks, Jim.
Great quote. Classic Jake Epstein quote. Very good. Yeah. Very good. And I don't mean that sarcastically. That was a good quote.
No, and we're going to have a couple layers of this. We'll talk about, major league level, what those guys are going through. But it's much different than if you're coaching amateur. Most of the people listening to this have kids that are under 18. And we're trying to help them get to the next level, whether you're a parent or whether you're a hitting coach helping those kids. What's the best way to further that player's career? That's why we're here. That's why I do what I do. That's why we're doing this podcast.
Yes. Week in and week out. I hear the dogs barking, so I think it's time.
Did
for you?
To, yeah,
I did. So I think it's time for you to get going. Follow us on social media at Jim Tara, at Epstein Hitting, both Twitter and Instagram. Email us your questions, concerns, comments, criticisms. You know the deal. Some of them, though, go in the spam folder. Jimbo Podcast 21 at gmail.com. That email is open to all emails, and you can write to us on YouTube. I had somebody write on YouTube, actually. You know what? Let me find it here. I'll read it off really quick. You see here. All right. Somebody wrote to us on our YouTube page, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast YouTube page. By the way, next week we're doing a mechanical breakdown series, episode 140, breaking down the swing of Jeff McNeil, one of the best hitters in all of baseball. I have to add Randy. We could do a Rosarena sometime too, but Luis Arraez. I got to add him to the list as well. But next week we're doing Jeff McNeil, Mr. Hitter himself. Randy Pohl wrote this on YouTube. Commenting on one of the episodes. Oh, damn it. Oh, there it is. Okay. I really enjoyed this episode. It brings back a lot of memories. I copied my favorite player's styles. My first favorite player, ready for this? Bobby Mercer. My all-time favorite player, Fred Lynn, copied him. Yaz, Carl Yastrzemski, not Mike Yastrzemski, maybe Mike Yastrzemski. I don't know. Yaz was a player that I copied when I taught myself to hit left-handed at 13. Right-handed, I guess this guy's a switch hitter. Good for him. He loved Dusty Baker, Steve Garvey, Reggie Smith. His favorites now, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, James Outman. So this guy's 62, so I'm guessing it's Carl Yastrzemski, by the way. He still loves to hit at age 62, so good for him. Randy Pohl wrote to us on YouTube. So thank you, Randy. Yeah, that's
Dodger fan now.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. Hitting at age 62. I hope to be doing the same thing. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't be. Maybe I'll just lose interest by that time. Maybe I'll finally lose interest and say that's it. All done. All right. Next week, Jeff McNeil. You got anything before we go?
No.
You want to get back to the kitchen?
That was my Roy Kent. No.
That's it. I'm about to pull an Earl Weaver on you.
Yeah, for sure.
You want to get back to the kitchen and start eating more broccoli? Yeah. Restart eating broccoli?
No, we got early games tomorrow. I got to get to bed. Got to get the plan to bed.
All right.
Got to plan my breakfast so my kid eats properly.
On that note, we will talk to you episode 140 next week. Thank you for listening and watching, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.